Okay. So, should we start or should we wait?
You can start.
Okay. Okay. So, hello and welcome everyone to the inaugural Tech Talk of Women in Data Science Mumbai and Kerala chapter. We are thrilled to kickstart our series of Data Tech Talk this year on International Women's Day. Happy Women's Day, everyone! And what could have been a better day to start, right? So, since this is our first event this year, and many people have joined this community since last year, just a quick introduction about what WIDS is and about this event. So, Women in Data Science, Mumbai and Kerala chapter are the regional chapter of the global Women in Data Science conference, which happens at Stanford University every year on International Women's Day. So, WITS Mumbai chapter was started by my co-ambassadors Julian and Kartika in 2018, and I joined in last year, and WITS Kerala chapter was started last year. So it's been 5 years since it started, and we are just thrilled about that fact. So about WITS International and WITS Regional chapter. So the common aim of the International WITS Conference and all the regional chapter is to inspire and educate data scientists worldwide and support women in this field and also men. Regardless of the gender, to support students and professionals who are still learning in the field. Um, it was started in Stanford in 2015, and now its presence is in more than 60 countries in worldwide. So for this year, we have a lot of plans with us. Um, so we are planning to run Tech Talks every month, and they are going to be live on YouTube uh, always. So make sure you subscribe to our channel. It's Vids Regional, and we also have a podcast named by Data Science Sagas, which you also will find on our YouTube channel. So we run episodes on AI in social media, healthcare, and crypto, and we bring in remarkable women and speakers to talk about these things. So they are very nice. So you can definitely subscribe. We also run outreach programs for high school students. So, in case anybody is interested, you can email us to these given email IDs. And also make sure you follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And in case you want to get involved as a volunteer and a speaker for this year or next year, you can always reach out to us. So, talking about today's speaker, so we have Bushra Amiwala today as our speaker. So I'll talk a little bit about her. So Bushra is an LCS associate at Google. She has recently came out of the college, and since then she has been involved with a lot of big tech companies. Apart from that, she's also the youngest Muslim elected official in the United States. So it's very inspiring to learn about her. She was also received the Glamour magazine's College Women of the Year title in 2018, and she has also been awarded an International Peace Ambassador Award from the organization HWPL, which comes under United Nations. So she's always doing volunteer work with organizations and communities like us and other non-profit organizations. So we are very glad and grateful for her presence to our session. Do we have her?
Yes, hi, I'm right
Yes.
here. How's it going?
Hey, Bushra, it's going good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good evening to all of you towards the end of your International Women's Day. And for me, I'm just getting started. It's about 9 a.m. for me in Chicago, and I know it's about 8:30 for you all. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. It is a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Awesome. Yeah. So I can go ahead and get started if that's okay with all of you. So I
Absolutely.
like to start off by saying that I like to tell stories. So I like to speak in a compilation of short stories. And then also, I love it when people ask questions at the end. I think I can talk about what I think is interesting for as long as I'd like to, but really what where the me and nurture of where my story comes from is what people ask questions and I'm able to answer those. So I love when there's dialogue. So definitely utilize the chat feature. I know this is being streamed live on YouTube and there's on your right hand panel, I'll definitely be taking a look at those as well during the duration of my talk. I plan on giving remarks for about 30 minutes and then opening the floor to questions for the rest of the time. So if that sounds well, go ahead and get started. So, my name is Bushra Amiwala. I was born and raised in Rogers Park, Chicago, but my story doesn't make sense unless I start off with my father's journey first. My dad actually immigrated to the United States from Karachi, Pakistan when he was 18 years old, and he had $20 in his pocket and what we say an abundance of dreams. My dad worked every job from bussing tables to flipping burgers to delivering pizzas to driving a taxi to later owning his own clothing store on the west side of Chicago called Chicago Style. And what's really interesting about my dad's journey is that he is a self made businessman. My dad actually, to this day, does not know how to read or write English. My dad was diagnosed with dyslexia at a young age, and in the education system, people didn't really know how to come to terms with something like that. People didn't know how to best educate him, how to guide him. And what came out of that was just a lot of frustration with the education system for him. So, what I saw, for example, being perhaps, let's say, a broken education system ended up inspiring me to get involved at the educational level in an elected capacity as I grew older. So I think it's so important to talk about our roots and where we come from because people hear my story of an ordinary person who emerged into an extraordinary leadership role and think that perhaps maybe she had all the resources, maybe she had, all the ducks in a row, but it's interesting to hear that it's actually something that the way my dad built himself up, it's almost that I did the same, but with what I had around me in the United States. So, talking about that, just pivoting a bit, growing up, I want to start off by telling you all a story about preschool. So, like I said, I'm going to tell a lot of stories. And preschool is the school that people attend when they're about 4 to 5 years old, just to put things into context and perspective. So, I was about 4 or 5 years old in preschool, and I had just learned how to read English. I could speak English. I watched a lot of TV. I primarily speak Urdu at home, but I had just learned how to read the language. And we were given song lyrics. We were given the words to a song and expected to read the words to the song and sing it and harmonize as we stood in a circle. And again, I was 4 or 5 years old. So that's a lot of multitasking for a young person to do as is. But as I looked around, everyone could sing this song so beautifully. And the words to this song were really long, such as Rudolph and reindeer, but I just couldn't sing the song. And everyone's able to sing it, read the words, understand what's happening, but I just actually didn't know what the song was. And I remember there was a girl next to me who also couldn't sing the song, and her name was Carmen. So I went up to Carmen afterwards and said, Carmen, why couldn't you sing the song? And she goes, well, I'm Jewish. And I say, oh, I think I am too. And really, what the point of the story is growing up, I thought there was something wrong with me because I was different. And it's hard to imagine yourself in a space where you don't see someone who looks like you already represented. We were singing Christmas carols in preschool. And not only myself, who comes from an Islamic faith and background, but people who come from other faiths and backgrounds at that young of an age, we didn't know what these songs were, but that's what was integrated into the mainstream education and curriculum. So it's those everyday moments and instances that reminded me that I was different, but also what it looks like to not necessarily have representation. So, with all that in said, like I said, I love to tell short stories that hopefully have some sort of impact and or rising action, falling action, climax. So, growing up, when I graduated from 8th grade, I'm about 12, 13 years old at this point. I actually went to go purchase school supplies. And when I went to go purchase school supplies, there was an older man in line ahead of me, and in front of him was a Muslim woman wearing a burqa, which is an Islamic veil that covers you from head to toe. And we're all buying our things. It's August. It's pretty hot at this point outside. It's towards the end of the summer. And Chicago, we know, can get really cold in the winter, but it can also get really hot in the summer. So it's about on the pretty warm side. And this man turns to this woman and he goes, "Aren't you hot in that?" And I don't think this man asked this question out of genuine curiosity, curious as to whether this woman was warm under her attire or not. But he essentially was getting at the question, why are you wearing that? And the second story I'm telling right now isn't a story of me being an upstander where I stood up for this woman and I said, hey, you shouldn't talk to someone like that or anything like that, unfortunately. But it's the story of what inspired me to begin wearing the hijab myself. Seeing this man torment this woman truly made me realize that had I been wearing the hijab, he would have turned around and asked me the same question. And this woman gathered her things and left. Didn't say anything in exchange. And we'll get back to sort of the idea of how not responding can be the loudest response at certain times. So at this point, I'm in high school now. And in high school, I'm at the ages for between 14 to 17 years old. And in this, my senior year of high school, I take an AP government and politics class. So it's a college level, university level government and politics class that I'm taking. And this is kind of where my first peak and interest of politics came from. Before this, I was very involved in nonprofit work, civic work, volunteerism, giving back to the community. That's what I did for fun. I was at 5 different nonprofit organizations the 5 days of the week. Everything from hunger, food insecurity, poverty, educational inequality, homelessness, you name it. Each issue that I found, perhaps that once impacted my father, inspired me to volunteer for an organization in my hometown and give back in that capacity. So I always like to ask the question at this point, so where does politics come from? I've told you all stories about how I was a very curious kid growing up. I've told you the story about perhaps why I began wearing the hijab as a way to rewrite the preconceived notion that people may have for Muslim women. And I told you about the amount of volunteering work and nonprofit work that I'm involved with and everything. But the bridge between all of that and politics still seems a little disconnected at this point, at this juncture. So I take this college level politics class and am blown away about systems of government. And I'm so fascinated by this idea of running for public office. So most people know that there's the president of the United States, right? You go, you vote for that person, they get elected. There's a hard campaigning process. But what people don't know is there are thousands of other positions that people also vote for. And all across the state, all across different governing bodies. And when I turned 18, I wanted to work for a really powerful elected person and did that. And it was someone on that campaign that saw leadership ability and potential in me that I definitely did not see in myself at the time. And they asked me to run for public office. So I was 18. I had just started university and was a freshman in college. And someone asked me to run for public office. And at this point, I was always very involved when it came to my major, what I was going to study in university, all of that. It was business. And what I found really compelling was the intersection of data and politics. And specifically, when I talk about data, I'm referencing the components of what if you were to run a large marketing campaign. And professionally today, you all may know that I work in marketing now, but I'm telling in the story a little backwards from the sequential order that it occurred. So if it does seem a little disconnected now, it'll definitely make sense towards the end. So I'm 18 at this point, and someone has told me that I should run for office myself, that I should put my name on a ballot, that I should work towards this goal, and then eventually get elected. And ignorance is bliss, because I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I didn't know what that process entailed either. So I decided to do it and decided to run for public office. And through this process, learned a lot about the tools that I already had within my kit, whether it be through volunteerism and nonprofit work, or through the specific courses I was learning in school, and how to bring all of that back into running a campaign. So I ran my campaign for public office the way you would run a social media campaign, the way you would run a small marketing campaign for a small business. And that's how I ran my campaign for public office, which I think is very fascinating because it's something that people hadn't necessarily seen before either. So going from there, I ran against someone who had been in their elected seat for 16 years, and I was 19 years old. So actually, I lost. However, when I lost my first election, I was very disappointed and I was very discouraged. Some of the things that happened to me during my first election cycle that I'm very transparent and open about. The first thing that happened was there was a third candidate who was hired to run in my election seat as well. There was a third person who was literally told and put in this race as a means to possibly lessen my chances of getting elected. And that person ran as well. So in a 3-person race at this point, there was myself, the person who had been in the seat for 16 years, and then there's a third person. So when I lost, I came in second with about 30% of the vote. And it's really upsetting to put your time, effort, and energy into a campaign for public office for a year and a half, and then to have the results, unfortunately, not be in your favor. And to have a loss be that public, and to have lots of people sort of know that, you ran for office and then you didn't get elected. People just unfortunately voted for someone else to be a better representative for your community. And that's what that looks like. It can be a really hard thing to come to terms with. However, something that really helped me cope with losing my first election was data. And I say this because looking at the election data, what I found was that we had people who voted for me had never voted in an election before. That meant that people who came to vote for my campaign and believed in my candidacy had never actually voted for a candidate ever before, meaning I turned out a historical amount of voters who voted for the very first time. And that's where I realized that's where I won. I won because not only did people come out and vote for the first time in general, but they came out to vote because my name was going to be on the ballot. And I think that's where that coping mechanism, that's where that comfort level came from, of how my campaign resulted in historical voter turnout, which I think was super exciting. And that's sort of where the win was. So throughout my political journey, I lost the first time I ran for public office. I ran against someone who'd been there for 16 years. And on election night, there were a lot of reporters that came to my election watch party and asked me, "Are you going to run for office again?" And I said, "No." I was like, "Definitely not. Like, I don't think this is for me." And people heard that, people saw that on live television, they read about it in the news. And the first person who reached out to me to say, "Please make sure that's not true," is the person that I ran for office against the first time. That person called me and said, "You have so much talent. You have so much you have to offer. You have so many people you were able to mobilize and encourage to come out and vote in elections. You have to run for office again." And 6 months later, I don't know what compelled me to do so, I decided to do it again. So I ran for office again 6 months later, and this time I was very strategic about understanding where my votes came from, where I should focus my efforts, and how I could best use data from my previous campaigns to propel me from moving forward in my second campaign. I essentially had a redo. I had the opportunity to take all of my learnings and do it all over again. And I did not want to pass up on this opportunity. And again, it was so short and so quick as 6 months later, where all of the learnings were super fresh in my mind. So I'm running for office again 6 months later. I'm like, this has to be easier than the first time because I've done this already. But there were 7 people running for that seat. So it was a very intense process as well. However, I knew that this time I wanted to focus on people who were already going to come out and vote anyways and get those people to vote for me. And then my second line of path of victory was to encourage people who have never voted before to come out and vote for me. And that's where my win number would be. So you see how I was able to sort of guide my strategy based on the way I saw the votes came from the first time. And that's truly what influenced my campaign strategy. So essentially, after 2 years of hard work and campaigning, I finally ran for office again a second time and got elected in April 2019 and went down in the Chicago History Museum as the youngest Muslim elected official in the United States, which I'm super proud to be sharing with all of you today because, as you heard, this was no easy feat and no seamless journey, to say the least. Something that I didn't necessarily touch on during my story so far was some of the financial challenges that came from running for public office. So it takes a lot of money to run for office. And I think that's something that people don't talk about as much. You have to be in a very financially secure place to be able to afford to hold public office. And you have to do a lot of fundraising. And I remember I was offered $54,500 by a company, by corporations who wanted to essentially bribe me and influence my strategy, which is why they were offering me this large sum of money, which I declined. I turned that money down because I wanted to stay true to the people I was going to represent. I wanted to stay true to the community members, to the people in my district, to the people who were going to come out and vote for me. Those were the people I want to represent, not large companies and corporations. So I turned that money down. And to this day, people talk about, if Bushra Amiwala accepted that money, she would have won. But morally and ethically, I could not have done that. And I'm still proud and still stand by the decision that I made about 4 years ago. So fast forward to today, I have been elected for 3 years now. And I'm super excited to talk about some of the things that I've been able to implement since getting elected and some of the metrics that we look at, but also want to touch on my day job as well, because outside of being elected, I also work at Google. I work as a customer solutions consultant, and our job is a client-facing role where we help people optimize their campaigns. We look at metrics, we see all of their marketing and advertising efforts, and I've worked on some of the biggest clients in all of large customer sales. My client right now is actually the Meta business, or while it may be better known as Facebook, but Meta. They're really pushing us, calling them that after the rebrand. And it's really cool to see the way that all of my worlds come together, whether it be my political background, whether it be the work that I do professionally at Google, or whether it be some of my nonprofit involvement and work as well. I think it's super cool to see these common themes and what really grounds you along the way. I want to close by talking about forward looking and some of the really exciting high points throughout this journey. I think it's easy to focus on the low points because I think a lesson, it can be told a little better there, but I wanted to talk about the high points too. So most notably, the past about 2 months ago, I was invited to have a 2-hour sit down with President Barack Obama. And in that 2-hour meeting, he wanted to hear my perspective on how he should build his upcoming presidential center in the south side of Chicago. And he wanted to hear a youth's perspective, a young person's perspective, someone who's elected, someone who's involved in the community and things like that. So to hear a very ordinary person, sit down with the former president, something that really meant a lot to me. And I think it's the epitome of the American dream for my family as well. I'm not this person who went to like a Harvard University or an Ivy League or had these extraordinary circumstances along the way, but it's really hard work, networking, mentorship, and asking for things that I would say has helped me get to where I am. And finally, there are 3 documentaries about me as well. There's one on Hulu, one on PBS, one on Amazon. And it's really cool to have had cameras follow me around during that process. I have like an IMWD page now where the page that they have actors, and I'm like listed as like a documentary person, which I think is super exciting because I used to read so many magazines as a kid. I used to watch so many documentaries, and to be in all of the ones that I saw growing up when I didn't see a face that resembled mine growing up, and to be that face myself is really inspiring for me. And that's what kind of keeps me going in the face of adversity, because by no means is this an easy feat. Juggling all of this is not easy either. People oftentimes ask how I'm able to do it all. And I think there's always something you're compromising. There's always something you could be doing with your time. And for me, choosing to give this time back to my community is how I choose to spend it. But that's time I could be spending with friends and family. That's time I could be spent exercising. That's time I love Zumba. So that's time I could spend at a Zumba class. It's time I could spend reading, developing myself. But I choose to give that time back to my community, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So I know I spoke a ton at everyone for, like I said, I do it for 30 minutes max, but I'm happy to take any questions if they're in the live, if they're in the panel, whether it be on YouTube, or if anyone wants to, if any of the organizers want to perhaps pop on screen and streamline that, I'm happy to take them.
Hi, Bushra. That was such an amazing story and your journey. I don't know how you've been doing this at such a young age. This is massive. Like, okay, I'm just super inspired right now. So I would just like to ask you, what was your family's reaction to your decisions of, hey, I'm going to run again? And I just want to just ask that. Because this is really, really too much to take in, but I have like a lot of questions, but could you answer that and we'll move on?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So, the first time I wanted to run for office, my parents both immigrated from Pakistan. So, they didn't know very much about what US politics entails. Their perception of politics was what they had seen back home. So, when I brought up, like, hey, I want to run for office, I want to be in politics, I want to be a part of the government, my mom's first answer was no. That's it. That's all she had to say. No. And again, I was 18, 19 years old. So of course I'm going to consult with my parents when making a big decision like this. And she really feared for my safety when it came to that. It wasn't anything. It honestly came from a place of really good intent. The reason she said no was because she's like, I fear for your safety. I've heard these things. It's a corrupt space. People are supposed to be dishonest. And I don't blame her for having that perception, but that's what I wanted to change for people too. And I could have been corrupt. I could have been dishonest. I was bribed. I was offered that large sum of money that I turned it down. And that's where you stand your ground, and that's where you showcase your morals. A second time wanting to run again, my mom was like, please no. And that's because she saw the sacrifice that I put in the first time. And to me, I was like, without reward, because I didn't get elected. But at that time, I'd coped with the data, I'd coped with the information, I'd coped with understanding who had voted for me. And I knew that there was reward and there was potential, and I had opportunity to do it again. And they were my biggest supporters throughout both of my campaigns, for sure.
That's awesome. So we have one question. I think you just touched upon that. Like, how much do you trust data, and how do you deal with the bias in data? when it comes, because right now I think there's a lot of deep fake running around. There's a lot of things that can be faked around, and there's definitely going to be bias. But what was your understanding of that?
That's a really good question. So I think what's interesting is I would talk about raw data versus data that's already been manipulated and handed to me. So I trust raw data in its fullest capacity because that is what it is. And it's specifically the data that I was receiving came from the Illinois State Board of Elections. So it was the rawest and most pure data in its purest form that I could later tailor, manipulate, look through to see what I'm looking for as a means to decide what outcomes I'm searching for. So whether it be first time voter, whether it be someone who's voted before, depending on what I'm looking for, I can curate it and manipulate it in that capacity. I think the bias in data comes from what story you're trying to have the data tell. And so again, when it comes to raw data, I don't think that exists. I think that's where the color kind of comes from. I think it comes from that influence. So that's how I would describe it. And I think that data again came from a formal government entity that was passed on to everyone. So I trusted it. I think that there could have been computer errors, but I think when it came from who voted for who, what is their demographic, I think I trusted that in its fullest capacity.
So in your team, I'm just asking a follow-up question. Was there a team of analysts who looked at the data and gave you a report every day morning? How was it?
So that I actually didn't have a team because I couldn't afford one in that capacity. So it was myself, and I majored in management information systems. So we did a lot of data manipulation in that, and a lot of my peers and I would come together and they would serve in a volunteer capacity to help me look through the abundance of data and decipher that. So when we sat down with the results, like I said, it was so comforting to be able to see the positive outcome in all of that and to see the trends of, wow, these people voted for the very first time and they voted for me.
Nice, nice. I have another question. So I'll just read it as it is, verbatim. Coming from a context of AI algorithms they tend to give biased results because of the second-order societal bias that data has. So um, I think it's pertaining to the bias that exists within the data. If you were running algorithms within your reports while you were working on it, there could be some bias that comes in within the that's already within the algorithm. So could you deep dive into what did you use, what algorithms did you use, or was there any bias within that?
Yeah, I definitely don't think we used any sort of complex algorithms when we were analyzing our data. However, when it came to social media marketing and looking at data and those aspects, those we definitely had to trust both all of the algorithms that were on the respective platforms in that capacity. And that's where definitely I would say there had been biases. There were for example, everything from a post during a morning versus a post in the evening, all of that can impact reach. It can impact the types of people you're reaching to, the types of people that see your posts, and all of that is impacted and influenced in that way. Again, when I came to the voter data that I was analyzing, I definitely don't think there were specific algorithms that I was using just to filter through it, just because it was so limited in its capacity as is, because we aren't allowed to see someone's name, obviously their phone number, where they live, their address. So there was lots of tabs and elements that were taken out of it, but up to the core of like first time voter, has voted in the primary before, demographic information like that was granted to us. But other than that, like it's private information for who you vote for. So we're not allowed to have that. So I think, again, I was really limited in what I could have done. So I don't even think it got to that point necessarily to see that. But fantastic question and very well said.
Thank you. I think that was the question right from the beginning. So I think we've answered that. But but that's okay. Okay, cool. So you could proceed with the second part of the talk if you have more to say. We
No,
don't have any further questions
yeah, I
right
think I
now.
covered it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's one more that's popped up. Ganesh is asking, I consider politics and social sector as interconnected. What do you think is the role of data science when it comes to politics apart from exit polls and predictions?
Well, I was going to say exit polls and predictions. So apart from that, I think it also can influence policy in a really great way. And I think that's perhaps where I see. So when it comes from politics in the social sector, when it comes to social issues, data can really help influence policy. So, for example, something I didn't necessarily touch on is that when I was first working on my very first political campaign after I graduated high school, I was about 18 years old and I worked on a Republican person's campaign. I ran for office as a Democrat, aligned values in a democratic way, but I ran for someone who was from an opposing party. And in that campaign, we were collecting poll survey data to sort of see where people's popularity and familiarity stood on certain topics. And the questions we would ask were very interesting. And the first question on that list that I would ask was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fearsome are you of an Islamic terror attack on US soil? And that was the first question I had to ask. So again, a scale of 1 to 10, how scared are you that this is going to happen? And as a Muslim woman, that's literally what I had to ask. And people would laugh because they'd be so uncomfortable by the situation. And I definitely don't blame them. I would too. And I share this to say that was the senator's way of gauging people's fear in a capacity to later sanction a certain group of people. So I think data can really play a heavy role when you're influencing and shaping policy because you can say, look, 80% of my constituents feel this way. Therefore, here is a policy I'm going to enact. And I think that's a really big way that people can manipulate data to say whatever they want it to say. They can use guiding questions that perhaps may not have correlation between certain policy to tell a story that they want to tell. So this was kind of a backwards example because this necessarily wasn't, let's say, an ignorant cause as opposed to like a social cause that was being moved forward, but it shows that it occurs in every aspect. So I think it's a fantastic question and put me on the spot with that one, but I'm glad we were able to come up with an answer about policy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a very good example of how data scientists, like I have friends who are working with the government in India as well, be it related to serving the underrepresented groups. There are a lot of policies that can be formed if you have the right set of data being collected. Though India is not really doing a good job of it, but yeah, I think you've covered that perfectly. So there's another question on how do you manage, by Prashansa, how do you manage your personal campaign work and social work along with working in Google, with Google and Meta? Because it definitely might not be easy.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think the number one skill is calendar management. And I say calendar management, not time management, because part of calendar management is also understanding that like I have to set time out to just check my email at times. And at that point, that's not even time management anymore. Like it's calendar management. So that's the biggest skill that I've learned so far, I would say. And it's definitely not easy. However, it's very rewarding. And I think I'm really lucky to work at a place like Google that really values and embodies work life balance. So I know that I'm not expected to respond to an email past 5 p.m., nor am I expected to log on before a certain time. And I have enough agency and autonomy with my schedule as well, where let's say I want to take a speaking engagement like this, I'll work a little later in the evening and I have that flexibility too. So that's why I say asking for things is so important because you truly can have it all. And I think a lot of people perhaps may not find their passion point in their day job. And I think that's totally okay. I think one can totally be seen as something you do to earn an income, to support yourself, to do a living, to do what you want to do as well. And they can be separate entities. And if you find them in the same bucket, then you're really lucky, is what I'll say on that front. But what's nice is that my elected seat, I have to go to 1 to 2 board meetings a month. So the commitment isn't as daunting formally as it would seem. Everything that I do out on the side, that's like extra, whether it be the book that I'm publishing in the next few months or speaking at events like this, I find that really fun. So I choose to do that in my free time.
That is awesome. I don't think there's any other Gen Z doing so many things in 24 hours. But yes, I love the fact that you're doing this, and I think you also touched upon how you're being that face because representation matters. So hats off on that as well. We'll definitely check out the book and the documentaries. So there's one more question from Karthika. It says, "Thank you for sharing your story. She's really curious to know how you lift yourself up when you feel low." And another question: if there's any one female role model that somebody you look up to, or where you gain your inspiration from, a book that you follow, just let us know what do you consume on a daily basis to do all of this.
Yeah. I definitely think that one female role model, I have to name more than just one. It would be either Michelle Obama, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I name these four women because they have a lot of things in common. A lot of them are the first, they're the youngest, they're people of color, they're women of color, and they are so graceful in instances of negativity. They're just resilient.
Mhm.
And I love that about them. That idea of
Mhm.
resiliency is what I like hope to emulate myself. You know, when I went
Mhm.
viral during my first campaign, I was on the cover of Time magazine and I was on Bloomberg forums, Now This, Teen Vogue, 17, Cosmo, you name it. So with all of that media attention came a lot of negative press too. Um, it came comments on Facebook and it came emails directly to myself saying like, hey, like you are so this, you are so that. And some of the comments were really personal. People would say like, hey, like lighten the lipstick next time. And clearly I didn't, but things like that do hurt. They still do impact me. And they say like, wow, I can't believe something like this has distracted from my messaging and my campaign and what I hope to stand for. And I think that's the unfortunate part. But seeing people like the four women I just mentioned, they face things like that too. And they don't pay attention to it and they're able to stay resilient during that too. And that's what inspires me.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I've been following Alexandra. I don't know her full name, but we do watch her dances, and she's amazing. So perfectly. I love the fact that you brought up that it's not that easy always to be that public face, and there's so much to take up when you go famous. So thank you for sharing that. And I would just like to know, like, how was it when you were fresh out of college and you interviewed for a company like Google? Did you have to take up any courses, or did you have any interview prep that you focus specifically on? Because I don't know how you found the time again, but if you did, let us know on that as well.
Yeah. So I actually, prior to working at Google, I interned at Deloitte and a similar role. And I think that helped give me a lot of real world experience to talk about during my interview process. I think a lot of the times we focus on hypothetical situations and how we would act, but it's so much more powerful to say, oh, actually, I was in a situation like that, and here is what I did. And I think
Hmm.
that internship experience really helped give me a lot of credibility and give me a lot of different topics and experiences to speak to. I also was able to speak to my campaign and what I learned throughout that process, but I didn't want that to be the sole focus of the interview. So there was a fine line and balance between that. I could have had my entire interview been just talking about my campaign, but I didn't want to do that because I knew there were other elements of me, of my leadership, of my work ethic that I wanted to showcase. And I think it's so easy to get bogged down in that one topic that we're super excited about. But I would say diversifying that experience when telling stories and when interviewing is really important.
Amazing. I'll just take a quick look if there's any question that I've missed. Thank you for sharing that. And it's been a massively inspiring talk all throughout. Um, I think would you like to share any book that you've recently read? Because I see that you've been preparing for writing your own book. But if
Yeah.
you're a reader, yeah.
The most recent book here, I actually have it right here. It was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This
Oh
is the
yeah.
most recent book that I'm reading, so I have it literally right here. Um, I
Mm,
love reading people the way that people tell their own life stories because one, I've been trying to read less of that right now because I don't want it to influence the way that I tell my own story in a very dramatic way. However, I do think
mhm.
it's very beautiful to see the way people reflect and talk about their own journey as well.
Awesome. I do have that in my Kindle, but I'm yet to read it. I'm kind of one of those person that hoards books, buys a lot of books, but doesn't find the time to finish that. Um, one of our New Year resolutions. Talking about resolutions, is there anything up for 2022 that you're planning within your constituent or within Google or outside?
Yeah, my biggest resolution for 2022 is I would say physical health. That's one thing that I've always put on the back burner, whether it be not sleeping enough, whether it be not exercising enough, whether it be not meditating or doing yoga or taking care of myself, not eating the best. I think that's the biggest thing I compromised along this journey the past 5 years. And to be upfront and honest and vulnerable with that, that perhaps my physical health may not be in the best capacity it can be because this is my vessel to do everything that I want to do. So my biggest goal and priority has actually been maintaining that. So like I said, I've been doing Zumba classes multiple times a week now, which I think is so much fun because I hate exercising. I don't think it's fun. Um, but I love to do that. So it's great that I've been able to find something that works for me. And I've been very conscious about my sleep schedule and things of that sort too.
Nice. And do you use data analytics for any of these personal things as well? Just curious, like,
Yeah, technically track my calories through my Fitness Pal, which I
mhm.
think like looks at all of the data between how many calories you burn, how many you've consumed, and things like that, and then it tells you. It can also predict what your goals you can meet and how practical it becomes on that aspect. But other than that, this is inspiring me to use it to its utmost capacity.
Amazing, amazing. I'll just hand it over to Prashansa. She's going to wrap it up. Yeah. You're on mute, Prashansa. Could you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry, I was talking on mute. Shah. It was really inspired to hear your story, like so many parts of it in college, and when you took the decision of running it for the second time. I was kind of relating to it to my life when certain decisions occur, and one time you fail, and second time when you have a choice to make, then you're like, what would happen? What if we fail again? Things like that. So it was really inspiring to hear it out. Yeah, so Kushbu has a question. She says thanks for sharing your story. It's really inspiring. And you mentioned documentaries reflecting your work. So could you please share those?
Yeah. Do you want me to put them in the YouTube? I can say them out loud and I'll put them in the YouTube chat too because I have the live stream link up as well. But on Hulu, it's called Our America Women Forward. It's the second episode. And Amazon, it's called Run. And on PBS, it is called And She Could Be Next. And that's a two-part series.
Amazing. I'll definitely watch.
Thank you.
So Ganesh says thank you for sharing your experiences. So are we going to have a second part of this, Visha?
A second part of this. Oh, absolutely. Anytime. I had so much fun engaging with all of you today and sharing my story. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And the questions that were asked were fantastic. So, anytime.
Sure. It was a pleasure to have you, and that too on our first Data Tech Talk. Like, I'm so inspired to just talk to you and connect with you, Visha. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So With this, we come to the end of the Data Tech Talk for today. Um, any last thoughts anyone would like to share? Okay, so I would like to share my screen again, and would like to talk about our next tech talk, which is going to be on March 19th, about use case of models in the payments world. And Akansha Agarwal, who is also working at Google as a data analyst, will be going to speak. So stay tuned and subscribe.